Through Sundar Ganesan, Director of Roja Muthiah Research Library, through A.S. Panneerselvan, distinguished journalist, my fellow coordinator who has joined from Vienna, Mr. Dharanidharan, author of today's book, Sundar Ganesan, Journey of a Civilization, Roja Muthiah Research Library, from Indus to Vaigai, Mr. R. Balakrishnan, distinguished journalist, and my fellow coordinator who has joined from Vienna, Mr. Dharanidharan. It's getting reflected. Author of today's book, Sundar Ganesan, Journey. And friends, colleagues of Roja Muthiah Library, and my friends who have participated from across the globe. Today is the inauguration of the first book reading of the joint venture between the Dravidian Professionals Forum and Roja Muthiah Research Library. As our founder, Honorable Minister for Finance and Human Resource Management, Government of Tamil Nadu, Dr. P.T.R. Palanivel Thiagarajan says, ideas are the lifeblood of any movement. So, with that idea, we started this organization, Dravidian Professionals Forum, mainly to connect those professionals who believe in social justice principles, but who does not have a platform to express their ideas and thoughts. Secondly, of late, what we thought is, what lacks is the content. So to develop that content, we also made various panel discussions involving local and international speakers on various subjects, research papers, and also policy notes. Is a great help to us in formulating the ideas and identifying speakers. I would like to thank him, first of all. However, this journey is quite a success because the last 1 year, we have done remarkably well. But in this journey, we found certain things which need to be addressed. Because now some may ask, why this book reading hub or a reading hub, why we should read books? The main issue is, in the last 1 decade or maybe last 2 decades, political parties or political organizations and social movements have lost this idea of book reading. Mainly, one reason what we thought is, it may be because of the advent of globalization, where there was a paradigm shift, because this book reading hub or the book reading can be traced to the Communist Party's model in Kerala. If you go to Kerala, every area committee office will have a small room attached to it. That small room is called, in Malayalam, Padanashala. That is a reading club or reading hub. And in that Padanashala, what happens is, there will be some, not much, some books will be there, and there will be newspapers. And this Padanashala is open to all the members and non-members of the Communist Party. The doctors, they may be engineers, they may be professors, rickshaw pullers, laborers, etc. So every particular space, and discuss about these ideas, which leads to interdisciplinary approach. A rickshaw puller will tell his concern to a doctor will tell his concern to an engineer, and there will be an exchange of ideas which happens at the ground level, on the base level. So this created the interdisciplinary approach. An extension of this interdisciplinary approach is the reflection of certain conventional universities like Jawaharlal University or Banaras Hindu University or maybe Aligarh Muslim University, where interdisciplinary studies are promoted. The students from various disciplines will be there. More than the teaching, more than the teachers there, the students get enriched themselves by interacting among themselves. That is the interdisciplinary approach. But this conventional universities, because of the globalization, this conventional universities are the conventional thought process and the conventional education policy underwent a paradigm shift with to cater the needs of these capitalist structures. Institutes like IIMs, maybe even national law schools were brought in. But what happened with these institutions were, these institutes, instead of imparting the knowledge or the discussion platform and enabling a student to know their rights, they trained the student to work in a corporate environment without questioning the master's direction. This led to the decline of critical thinking. Further, today, what we are facing is a serious internet penetration. Because of the serious internet penetration and also the mobile phones, which we are seeing, and Tamil Nadu is wise. Tamil Nadu has got more than 60% or 70% internet penetration. People tend to forget about book reading from students, from kids, from even professionals. What they tend to believe is the messages which come from WhatsApp, the short messages, or the Facebook. Even though those messages may not be, and they tend to believe in those messages, and they are losing the patience to sit and read a book, the patience to sit and discuss and debate with their fellow residents. Of course, these technologies enable a person to do multitasking. A person can do five messages at a time or 10 messages at a time, or maybe even he can read 5 or 10 messages at a time. This is a technology, but this is their profit model. They want to make short messages so that they can also increase the profit. But what is declining here is the ability of a person, this is a descent, the ability of a person to critically think and to have the patience to sit and read a book. So hence, when we discuss this with our Honorable Finance Minister and through A.S. Pannirselvan and the director of Roja Muthiah Library, Mr. Sundar, why can't we bring back this culture of book reading? Because this culture of book reading is essential for a person to understand the historical facts effectively. With this, we have started this program, and I'm thankful to the organizers and curators for bringing this wonderful book that is the journey of a civilization from Indus to Vaigai. And the selection of the book also gains importance because for critical thinking, first thing what a person needs is he has to understand what I am, from where we came, what was our behavioral pattern. If we want to understand these 3 questions, only if we understand these 3 questions, one can form a base for critical thinking. These 3 questions can be understood only if he knows his civilization. So this book gains importance. So journey of civilization from Indus to Vaigai, let us go through it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ugar Gandhi. I also thank Honorable Minister of Finance and Human Resource Management, Government of Tamil Nadu, for taking this initiative and suggesting for the collaboration. I also want to thank my colleague, Mr. A.S. Pannirselvan, also one of the curators of this series. Our journey of a civilization has come at a very important moment in the history of India, history of independent India. Also for Tamils, it is a book that has raised, or at least raises the consciousness, the collective consciousness of the Tamils, and also for the Dravidian proof. Use this. Yes. I think the author has joined us on Zoom, over Zoom. We have to thank Mr. Balakrishnan for bringing this wonderful book. His 30 years of research work that has gone into this book. And he's also the honorary consultant for the Indus Research Center of the Roja Muthiah Research Library. And also, as a Tamil student, studied MA in Tamil and got into the civil services by writing the civil service examination in Tamil. So that's very important for us to know. And a person who went to Orissa, because he belongs to the Orissa cadre, when he joined the services, he always shares this story with us, that he carried just the volumes of Sangam literature with him. And once when he visited one of the villages, and he was so shocked that he saw the name board as Tamari. And when he started talking to people there, and he also he could relate to them because the language that they spoke was almost similar to one of the Dravidian languages. So he was fascinated by that and started getting interested in this, interested in knowing more about this. And that was a starting point for him for all his research. And then it has led to what we have now in our hand, this wonderful book called The Journey of Civilization. I'll return back to the village Tamari later. This book encompasses various subjects. It's a multidisciplinary book. First of all, it will fall under what's called as the Indus studies, because it talks about the Indus civilization in a big way. And it involves what's called as onomastics, which is name studies. Could be place names, it could be personal names, it could be surnames, it could be habitat names or names of villages, could be any name. So it involves onomastics. Then the latest DNA studies, which acts as sort of a litmus test to the entire problem. And we all know that just before this book, another book was released by Tony Joseph, which also talks about the origins and the people who are involved in the Indus civilization. This book also involves archaeological studies. So several excavations that were done, and the material that has been found in these archaeology forms a very important part of this book, because the way he has interpreted is very important, and that we will see in a few minutes. And of course, it also falls under Dravidian studies, because it furthers the proof of Dravidian authorship of the Indus civilization. And the most important, which is the Sangam literature, as a Tamil student, it has offered him a big hand in understanding the Indus civilization much better, because it's a riddle, it's a puzzle. The reason is the Tamil geography and the Indus civilization geography is nearly 2,500 kilometers apart and more than 2,500 years apart. So he uses a very interesting methodology where he brings in the Sangam literature, which will actually bridge the gap between the two geographies, and also uses place names as markers to understand people migration. People have always migrated and are migrating. So it is important to understand what happens when people migrate and what do they do, and when they go to a new place. So he brings in these elements to further the understanding of Indus civilization, especially when the Indus script has not been deciphered so far. As the Indus script has not been deciphered so far by several people, even though several people have attempted it. So they have almost hit a roadblock. So we will have to use other means other elements to understand the civilization and thereby interpreting that subject. So Balakrishnan employs these methods to bring in a new kind of understanding. Let me show you how this book is arranged. It has total 17 chapters with an introduction and an epilogue. And the first 6 chapters are foundational chapters. And 7 to 11 are basically arguments. He places several arguments through several interesting ideas. And then, of course, he supports them with case studies through what is called as cultural remnants or cultural legacy that we can find in the current Tamil geography. And of course, with latest finds, he bridges the gap through the umbilical cord of the Tamil civilization can also be seen through Adichanallur and Kiradi excavations that has happened very recently. And finally, a very long epilogue. So this book, it's very interesting. I'm going to tell you how you can read this book. You can read the entire book from page number 1 to the last. You can also take chapter by chapter and read them, or you can pick up a chapter at any point and go to the next chapter anytime. Or you can also read the chapter number 17 first and go backwards. So in any manner you read, you will not miss anything. You can also see the images, just the images, without reading the book. Just see the images and read the legends. That will give you a story. You can just see the maps, and that will give you a story. You can see the flow charts, that will give you a story. So you will still be able to make sense out of what is there in this book. Then, of course, if you read the book, you have much more surprises as to what is really available in the Tamil literature. What Tamils have really contributed is so immense. And Balakrishnan, very interestingly, has given a rereading of, or a new reading, a new lens, new pair of lenses for us to look at Sangam literature. Because so far, people who have studied through conventional sources have a particular way of understanding Tamil literature, basically through love and war. But Balakrishnan offers how to see this Sangam literature as a historical document. Because historians have definitely failed in making an attempt to see the Sangam literature as a historical document. So it becomes, this book is a pioneering effort in that direction. This is the Gordon building in Shimla, where the Archaeological Survey of India office was there in the beginning, during the colonial period. Well, let us start with this map. In the first chapter, he talks about the migrations, the early migrations, the subsequent migrations. Early migrations started somewhere around 60,000 years ago, and there were several waves of migration, and it has not stopped. The migrations have been continuous, and at one point, people settle in what's called as the Fertile Crescent in the Mesopotamia region, where it's marked green. The slide you can see it's in green color, and you can also see the routes which people have taken and how they came to the subcontinent here, and so forth. Now, this entire book can also be seen through just one flow chart. How people came from the Fertile Crescent to the northwestern geography, namely Pakistan, Afghanistan, and who were called as the ancient ancestral South Indian. It's a very interesting name that has been coined very recently by researchers in Harvard when they brought out this paper in Nature and Science. My feeling is they probably came up with these words Dravidian and Aryan which was contested by a few people, and probably they had a compromising solution, and they have used this, they're using these phrases, ancient ancestral South Indian and ancient ancestral North Indian, to denote people. Also, this book, in this book, the beginning of the book, Balakrishnan clarifies the word Dravidian and Aryan are used as linguistic terms and not in, does not have any connotation related to race. So, at least now. So in the beginning, people moved from Iranian region, Iran region, and as hunter-gatherers. And there is they come to this area called Pakistan, where we find the Indus civilization, and they become the ancient ancestral South Indian. And then they become the Harappans, early Harappans. And much later, when the steppe pastoralists from the same region start moving into Harappa, they mix and they become ancestral North Indian. So you can see the entire flow chart. The ancestral North Indian, South Indian, they both mix and they become the current South Asians. So if we test the DNA of people in India, most of us will have the same kind of pattern. And so we cannot be racially different. That is why Balakrishnan uses, not only Balakrishnan, several people who have proposed these theories have, like Airavata Mahadevan, Asko Parpola have said this in the past also, because now it's all the same stock. The man who discovered the Indus civilization and brought it to the notice of the world in 1924 was John Marshall. So John Marshall, since then, the defining features of IAVC remains the same. They've talked about baked bricks, the standard sizes, terracotta objects, copper and bronze objects, the mother goddess, solid wheel, the citadel on the elevated platform and the lower town, then standard weights and measures. This has stayed for a very long time. But what has changed in this book is, this book gives a new, completely new interpretation as to how to understand these things. And that was possible because of interpreting this through the Dravidian languages, which Balakrishnan has extensively quoted in this book. We will see that. Then he talks about, in a chapter about the Dravidian hypothesis. The person in the center is Sunita Kumar Chatterjee. Just when John Marshall announced this in the London Illustrated Weekly, in a few months, he wrote this, Sunita Kumar Chatterjee wrote this article on Dravidian origins and the beginning of Indus civilization in 1924. In this paper, he says very clearly, this civilization must be Dravidian. So this is not a new theory. This theory exists from the day this civilization was discovered. Even John Marshall himself has said that it has to be Dravidian. Then on the left, we have Father Heras, Henry Heras, who also wrote a book which is called The Proto-Indian Mediterranean Culture in 1953. And he proposes that the entire subcontinent should be Dravidian. Then comes Asko Parpola much later, and he has interpreted the script. He has gone directly to the script and he starts analyzing the script and interpreting them. And he uses an interesting methodology called the rebus technique to decipher the script. And the most important thing people who quite famous is the word meaning fish, win mean, sim mean, aru mean, elu mean. So he goes on interpreting the different sign list as mean a particular group of signs. Then another very important interpretation is about donkey, which I'll come to that a little later in another slide. I'll be talking about that. Then in that series, we have another very important man called Airavata Mahadevan. who worked on Indus for nearly 40 years or more than 40 years. And what you see on the right side is the sign list that he has interpreted. That's the last paper he wrote before he passed away. And interestingly, I use this because this particular paper draws from the idea of Mr. Balakrishnan's theory of place names, how he has identified place names, and the Dravidian paradigms that he uses in his book. So it's a very important paper. It's a festive volume. He has written this paper where he finds this sign you see as the high mountains, western hills, which are male. Male means high. Male also has another meaning called merk, meaning west. The next one is Kodagu, meaning western. Kodagu means western. And Kidak means eastern. Keel Kundru. Keel means low, but also east. So like that, he has used these interesting ideas presented by Balakrishnan, and he has interpreted some of the sign lists, which you see here. Apart from many other things that Mahadevan has contributed, where he talks about the Agatya myth, which is very important. In one of the Sangam poems, where one of the important poets have described how this particular chieftain has come from a place called Dwaraka, 47 generations ago. So that has been documented, and he has interpreted. In Tamil, the place name is called Thuvarai. So Mahadevan has interpreted this as Dwarakai. Thuvarai is Dwaraka. And not only Mahadevan, even a few other scholars have written about it. So this is a very important thing also from Sangam literature. He has also identified what is called as Murugu, as Dravidian, not Tamil word, and also in the Dravidian languages. He is identified in several Dravidian languages. So all these things have been presented in one place, in one chapter, for people to understand what this Dravidian hypothesis is all about. So this acts as a kind of a textbook to understand the Dravidianness of the Indus civilization. Then in the next chapter, which is also a very, very important chapter, interesting chapter, where he's going to talk about place names. He's going to say that there are names in Pakistan, place names, and those place names are all here in Tamil Nadu. How do I believe this? Now, people will have this question, how do I trust this? So we have to understand the nature of human beings. When people migrate, what do they do? So he has offered two interesting examples, which is the recent migration, a few hundred years back, when people migrated from Europe to Americas. People have taken their place names from their regions and named for the new geographies. So you can see London, Paris, Dublin, Yorkshire, York, and so many other places. Also some of the African names, because you can see a place called Ethiopia or Little Ethiopia. So all these are place names in the US now. So without any doubt, we all will know that these are place names from Europe or from Africa. So on the right side, you see another slide where Iran is shown. A number of names in Iran are also there, like Nariman, Bori, and a few other names, where all these names are, and if you see these names, you can easily identify that it will strike a chord somewhere. We know that these are Parsi names in India. So how place names have become names of people or surnames of people. So there is a very interesting phenomenon. Place names become place names, or place names become the first name of a person. The place name can become the surname of a person. So like this, there are several possibilities which he has shown through these two, one through the modern period, one through the medieval period. So these are very important things. And also you see the very interesting quote that he brings in this book. He always shared this with us, once when he went to a village, a tribal village, he was asking people, and they had migrated from one location to another location, and they have kept the same village name in the newer location. So he asked them why they were doing this. So I believe this tribal man said, what will happen to our forefathers or grandfathers as they come as spirits in search of us? And they may get confused. They may get confused if we change the name of our village. So we can't do that. So that's a very interesting quote that he has given. It really, this means a lot because so much of importance Balakrishnan has given to tribal society that we can learn so much from them. That's very important. Now, in the next chapter, he introduces Sangam literature to a person who has not read Sangam literature before. So it's not difficult to understand Sangam literature. For people to, this will offer us a nice window for people to understand Sangam literature, and also for people who have already studied Sangam literature, it offers a new kind of spectacles for them to look at what they can look for and what they can actually see and what we should see, how we should see. So these are some of the ideas that are present. He talks about, the Sangam literature talks about Porkoti, meaning golden Himalayas, Imayachavaran, meaning red Himalayas. In several places, poems, they describe, Himalayas are described like this. Tamil Nadu is here. People, Tamil speaking people are down in the south. How did this Sangam poet get to know about the characteristic of Himalayas? Only once you go to a particular height, a particular elevation, that you can see the snow-covered peak in these colors. How did the Tamil poet get to know this idea that it was in this color? So he raises these questions. Similarly, there is a yak. Yak can survive only at a particular height. If they come down, they will die. So when and this yak has a very interesting eating habit. It's a particular type of grass. It's called naranda in Tamil. It's a fragrant grass, and therefore it gives a fragrant milk. We all know that yak teas taste differently, and it has a very interesting taste, and people have talked so much about it. There's so much of literature about it. But it is not just that. The Sangam poet describes this particular yak that it can, if it loses its hair, that it will die. What does that mean? People have misinterpreted this yak as a deer in several cases, but it is the yak. So when does it actually lose the hair? When it goes to a different elevation, a lower elevation, then it will lose its hair, and therefore it will die. It can't survive because it needs that fur. And also the word for this hair is very interesting. In Tamil, it's called kavari, and that's why it's called kavari ma. Kavari ma is interpreted as kavari man. Therefore, kavari man has, some people have written this as, they named it as black buck. So it is not kavari ma. It's kavari ma. Ma means animal. And so this kavari also, when it changes in the Dravidian language, it's called kavari, savari. And it goes on like that. And in another language, it's called chamar. And Tamil, there's a word called chamaram. Chamaram means, those days, the fan that's used for kings is called chamaram. Chamaram is made out of yak hair. That's very important for us to know. Similarly, savari, the word I use, savari mudi, meaning women used to have, when their hair is short, or even they want their hair to look longer, they add this extra hair made out of yak hair, and that's called Savari Mudi. So that's very important. So that's aside. How does the Tamil poet know about this habit of a yak that's in that elevation? That's a question we need to ask. Similarly, lion. The Tamil literature talks so much about lion, but there is no lion south of Narmada anywhere. Not even there's an archaeological find of lion so far. He has checked with the experts and he has written about that as well. And lion, we all know that lion is only in one small area called Gir Forest in Gujarat. And the only place where we can see an elephant and a lion is in that region. So literature talks about the elephant and lion and some other animals coming together to drink water in one place. So when they drink water, they don't attack each other. That's another nature we have to understand. And there's in another poem, you see on the slide, there's a lion claws with flesh. So the literature, the poem talks about the flesh that's caught in between the claws. So if this minute details that can be captured in a poem, how does a Tamil poet know? Again, we have to ask that question. So with that, the next chapter is a very important chapter called the most defining chapter, which acts as a centerpiece between two sides of a book, is this chapter where he uses the entire place name theory by bringing in solid evidences of place names in the Northwestern geography and in the current Tamil geography. It's called KVT complex is Korkai Vanji Tondi complex. Korkai Vanji Tondi are place names in Tamil Nadu. Why has he used this complex name as KVT complex? This is a very interesting thing. For instance, if you find Madurai in Pakistan, people can always say that there is a Madurai in North India called Mathura. There is a place called Mathura in North India, or any other place. You can easily find out. So he has used those names which are absolutely unique to the Tamil geography, and nowhere else in India that you can find these names, or no language can claim. So these names are found exactly in Pakistan. That's why he has named this complex as Korkai Vanji Tondi complex. And not just one name, hundreds and hundreds of place names are exactly similar or with small changes that you can find in Pakistan and Afghanistan, which is the Indus region. And on the right side, I have used just one example, which is called a place name called Kallur. The name Kallur is nowhere else. You can find only in these locations that we have it's been plotted here, up until in the peninsular India, in Maharashtra, Andhra, Karnataka, Kerala, and Tamil Nadu. And the only other places in Pakistan. So he calls this as Kallur corridor. So there are a few names like that, very unique, and it will be like this, exactly like this. So this chapter talks about different, as I mentioned earlier, about names of kings as place names, names of rivers, names of forests, names of habitats as names, place names here in Tamil Nadu. So as I said, the two geographies which are separated by 2,500 kilometers and 2,500 years, he has found a bridge, which is called the Sangam literature on one side, and place names to bridge these gaps. The next one is another very interesting chapter called the High West Low East paradigm. So each language has unique features. I must tell you here that Airavata Mahadevan uses a particular methodology where he finds bilingual parallels. He finds interesting ideas in Tamil, also in Sanskrit. But Balakrishnan uses another methodology where he identifies unique things in a particular language, which is not available in that language or understood differently in another language. Similarly, as I mentioned in one of my earlier slides, the western side, we have the citadel. On the eastern side is a place where the masses live. And the western side is always elevated. This knowledge was there already. It was existing. People have talked about it, but they did not identify that it is unique to a particular language. So that's very important. So in Tamil language, west is called Mel, Merk. East is called Kirak. Mel, Merk. Mel means high. Kir means low. Kir also means east. So the word that interchanges very interestingly, Kir, Kirak, and Mel, Merk, has to be understood only in this particular language or in any Dravidian language, and it's not possible in any other Indo-Aryan language at all. So how does he substantiate this? He says, what is so sacred for people who spoke the Aryan language? What was so interesting for the people who spoke in a Dravidian language? For non-Dravidian language, it was north and south which was very sacred. Because north, the gods were residing in the north and ancestors were residing in the south. So these two are sacred. For Dravidians, or the Dravidian language speaking people, east and west was very, very important. That's because of this pattern that they have identified. Probably because the Iran plateau is also situated like that. The Indus civilization itself is tilted like this from the west to east. And the Dravidian plateau is also tilted like the west is high and the east is low. So these are the parameters. They have identified these things, and people have identified their habitats, where they should live and so on. So Balakrishnan uses a very interesting matrix called Dems Matrix, and where he talks about the elevation, the direction, elevation, and there are other factors where, to identify. If you want to identify if this is a Dravidian nature, then it should fit in this particular matrix. If it fits there, then it is Dravidian. That kind of a theoretical framework that he has given, which is called, the other thing is called social, meaning it's not just direction. We all know that east is Kirak, west is Merk. It should show in geography that Merk is high and Kirak is low. It shows here. Then also people who are on the western side are in the elevated position, meaning they're more important people because they were the ruling class. Socially, they are elevated. And there is a class which is the working class, which is in the lower. So it shows in the social. Similarly, this kind of a framework is not available for people who have settled where people speak the Indo-Aryan languages or Indo-European language. That's very important. Now, do I have time? Okay, I have to be quick. Yeah, 10 more minutes. In another chapter, it's called Dravidian red. The word red in Tamil, it means Sivappu. Unless it's understood in that particular language, the meaning will change. That's why people were not able to identify these things earlier. It had to wait for somebody who knows Tamil very well to see these things. There are several defining features which are red in color in the Indus civilization, which number one, the bricks. Numerous bricks can be found in these areas. In fact, the civilization itself was discovered only when accidentally they started, ruining for running the railway line. They were taking the bricks that were available there, and they did not realize that there was a civilization here earlier. Then much later, they found that this must be very important, and the Archaeological Survey of India started digging that place. So one of the defining features is brick, and it is standardized in size. And there is copper. It's a bronze civilization. So without copper, we can't have bronze. So bronze, the color of bronze is red in color, and other objects that they have found is also red in color. So they had this obsession for red. Now, if you take the word brick, in Tamil it is called sengal. So it has two words in it. One is sem, second is kal. The kal means stone, but sem means, it has two meanings. It is polysemous. One is, did it get the name sengal because it's red in color, or sem also means perfect, or because it was perfect? So that's a big question. Now, so Balakrishnan further goes into this, and he deconstructs the entire thing here about the word sem and sengal and all that, how it transfers from what's called as physical thing, what we see physically with our eyes, and you can, as a material thing. And then from that, it gets into administrative usage. It's called sengol, meaning scepter. Sengol means scepter. A person who rules a country with justice, to uphold justice. So that's very important, how it gets into politics, and then how it gets into culture. The word sem is used as an adjective for describing something. For instance, semori, or refined, or perfect language, or language that is full of abundance. So it has all these meanings inbuilt. So Balakrishnan says, unless a language has a civilizational transformation, it's not possible to have obtained so many words. He uses a very interesting phrase in Tamil, which is "Kutta vaittu utkarndavan kugaikulle irukkiran, nadanda sendravan mattume nagarigangale padaithan." Meaning, a person who sits in one place or still living in caves, only people who started walking have found civilizations, made civilizations. And through this civilizational effort, the making of the civilization, people have enriched their vocabulary from something as small as the word sem to semori, sengol, sengonmai, and so many other things. In fact, the word sem, if you take personal names in Tamil, the highest number of words, names are using this sem as adjective, sem or seng as adjective. Then comes a very interesting chapter called Potroot, where he identifies different types of pots. The last stop officially discovered and published is the place called Daimabad in Maharashtra, which is an Indus site. Below that, we have still not excavated, so we don't know yet. But having excavated so many places, Indus sites, apart from Pakistan, the other places in India, in the subcontinent here, most of these places have what's called as the black and red ware pottery. And I must say that, he has quoted one scholar called B.N. Saraswati, where he has written a book called Indian Pottery. And he has completely ignored pottery that's in the south of India. So that's very important. Now, the name is Indian pottery, but he ignores all South Indian pottery. Now, through these evidences that black and red ware is found in so many places, gives us a completely different picture. I don't think anybody else has placed these things side by side for us to take a look at in one place. So that way this book becomes very important for us. And then he also brings in another very interesting idea, where the black and red bed pottery is there on one side, and there is a gray bed pottery on one side, very close to each other in a region in the Ganga Doab, and they have not mixed with each other for several centuries. So that's a very important thing to know for us to understand. And this has been well documented by several scholars like Romila Thapar, Inglis, and a few other people. And Converse, one of the most important contributions is by this scholar called Converse. So they have documented these things. And also how in Tamil society, the potters were held in a very big, they had a big role, and they were completely pushed lower down with the arrival of people. And so in the society, some people got elevated and some people got lowered. So that's very important for us to understand from this chapter. Also, the donkey that's used here has become a derogatory thing in Indian culture right now. But that was not the case. The Sangam literature talks so proudly about having donkey. In fact, the chieftains used to take a donkey ride to meet people. So in this chapter called Dravidian Gujarat, two ideas are present, one important ideas, apart from the place names. One is a bone-eating camel that you can find in this desert. Again, South India, there is no camel. How did such an intricate idea of camel eating bone could be documented by a Tamil poet? Is an important thing. Secondly, the wild ass that can be seen only in this region, in Gujarat. So the Sangam poem poetry talks about a chieftain riding this cart and trying to meet his heroine. And through the salt desert where it's a shallow water enters and the seawater enters, and a particular type of shark is there, and the shark is biting the legs of this donkey, and the donkeys are limping, but still it's running to meet this heroine. So this is the song which is documented in Sangam literature. Now, two things. One, Asco Purple has written about this wild ass, how it has been employed in the seals of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. You can see the seal there. And he says the word Kadudai must have been used in the Indus civilization, even during that time. And it has two words, Kadu, Udai. Udai means kick. As the Kadu means Kadiveli, the open space that's there, is the name given to that. That's what it means. And Udai means to kick, the kicking ass. So Asco Purple has written a paper on that. And incidentally, we also find only in that region. So it becomes important. And also Sangam literature talks about what's called as Ko Veru Kedde. Ko means the king. Ko Veru Kedde means a king who goes on this donkey. Then there's a chapter called Dravidian Maharashtra. I'm skipping through the place name because I assume that by now you'll know that all these place names are available in many of these states now. Maharashtra, there's like Sangam literature, there's a very interesting poetry with 700 songs. It's called Sattasai. It's called Sattasai, Hala Sattasai, yes. One of the Satavahana kings called Hala has compiled this literature called Sattasai, and it has 700 poems, much similar to the Sangam literature, and it is all in Prakrit. Probably that is the only old literature that's available in India other than Sangam literature, which is secular in nature. It does not talk about bhakti or anything. So that's very important. So he documents these things and how the similarities between the two geographies again. And of course, there are several place names. The There's a place called Ponbadu Konganam. Konganam is in Maharashtra. Then he provides case studies where he talks about different aspects of the certain communities in Tamil Nadu, the Kannagi story, which I'm going to rush through. We can find Anduvan, the name Anduvan, Adan, Satandai in pottery, which are all in Tamil Brahmi or Tamil script, found in Kodumanal and Thirupurankuntram and several other places, also now in Kiradi. Also Kiradi, they have found names like Adan. So we can see these names, which are found in Sangam literature and also as place names in Pakistan. That's important. It's not only people who migrated, also livestock got migrated, and you see the Zebu bull, the seals, and you can see much similar to that is the Kangam cattle in Tamil Nadu. And the townscape of Nagaratta. If you see the Indus civilization plan, it will be somewhat similar to this. So it's all northwest, north, south, east, west, gridiron pattern, roads and houses that you can see there, and you see similar houses in now, very much now in the place called Pallato. This is Pallato, one of the Nagarattar communities where the business communities that they live here. And the Nagarattar temples, there are 9 temples. All the 9 temples are place names in Pakistan. Similarly, the story of Kannagi, he goes into the Kannagi is one of the most important characters in this book, in the epic called Silappadigaram for Tamils. At the end of the stories, there is injustice for her, and she burns Madurai city and goes to Chera country, and from there she flies into the sky. That's a story that's in Silappadigaram. But then in Sri Lanka, they have a different story. So in Sri Lanka, the story is Madurai, after Madurai, burning Madurai, she does not go to Chera country. Instead, she goes to Sri Lanka, and she was in rage. And they didn't know how to cool her down. So they start singing certain songs, which is called Kulati Padalgal, meaning cooling songs. And through that, she cools down, finally settles there in Sri Lanka. That's, they have celebrations every year in Sri Lanka, in several places. Also, the Sinhala community, they have a somewhat different, same Kannagi, but they have it in different names. And the story of Kannagi is very interesting. When she burns the city of Madurai, all she does is, she cuts her breasts and throws in the city, and the city is burning. This is a very important element that we see in several places in the subcontinent. And Balakrishnan very interestingly brings up to the current period, the modern period, where this woman, Nangeli, she cut her breasts and gave it to the authorities when they wanted tax in Kerala. So this was in the early 19th century, I think. Her name is Nangeli. There is a statue for her you can see in Kochi. And the similar stories, you see in Kannagi, which is ancient, it's an epic. Now you see this in the current period. And there is also a similar story in Gujarat, it's called Mata, where she was harassed by some men, and they couldn't tolerate this. And this is what she did. She cut her breast and threw it on the people, and she curses them. This is used as a way of cursing people when they are humiliated or tortured. And in another chapter, it talks about a particular tree called Vanni tree, where the elements of the Vanni tree can be found in the seals in Mohenjo-daro. And you can also see this as a stamp. The name Vanni, the place name Vanni, in Tamil Nadu, it's called Vanni. When you go to Karnataka, it's called Banni. Then you go to little north in Maharashtra, it becomes Shammi. Then you go to Andhra, it becomes Jammi. So like that, from Vanni, Shammi, Jammi, there are, so many transformations. And finally, in Rajasthan, it's called Kejri. That people from Rajasthan, if you're there from Rajasthan, you may know the tree called Kejri, and in the medieval period, I think it's in the 18th, 17th century, there was a king who wanted to cut the trees. People went and hugged the tree. They wouldn't let this happen. So the same story repeated in the Chipko movement, where people got inspired from this story, and the Chipko movement, they did the same thing. The Chipko movement, I think it was in the 70s. So the one tree, the Sangam literature talks about it. Several epics, even Mahabharata even talks about it. And one tree becomes a very sacred tree for people here. It's still, if you go to the temple in Thiruvannamalai, you will find this as a sacred tree in Marundeshwara temple and in several other temples as well. In Silapadikam, they talk about the one tree where some important transactions happening under the one tree. So the important transactions happen under one tree because they are not supposed to lie. They have to speak the truth. That's very important. They have to honor it. So the Silapadikaram documents it. Similar stories also documented in Thiruvilayadal Puranam. And then Vani tree is called Tree of Life because there are several legends like this where when people, for instance, this story is, he has documented the story here. There's a man and a woman who fall in love, and the entire community does not agree to that. So they run for life, and there's a river, and there's this one tree across the river. The one tree bends for them to escape. They cling on to the tree and go to the other side, and they are saved. There are several stories in several communities like this, and that's why it's called the Tree of Life. Another very important anthropological information is, there's a community called One Year community here. People associate that One Year community with, they say, is Agni Kula One Year. How did this word Agni come? It's because of, it's also documented in the caste and tribes of India. So when it was documented, obviously people were consulted who knew Tamil and Sanskrit. So these people have said that, the word Vanni comes from the word Bahni, which is actually Agni. It's kind of a spin, I think, to my, to me, that's how it sounds. But then there's a very interesting way to understand which Balakrishnan presents. Because he talks about the why this one tree was used, why it was sacred for people, and what it was used for. The one twigs are usually used to perform rites in wedding ceremonies as well as funerals. Wedding, the twigs are used to light the fire. So it is obviously associated with fire. Therefore, they have made this extension that it is Agni and Agni Kulam. But it's actually one twig. And this particular idea of this tree being sacred is not just in India, but also in Saudi Arabia and some of the Mediterranean regions. In Saudi Arabia, it's a national tree. To that extent, this is a very important tree that we have to really understand as well. And that's why they have to commemorate this. They have made this stamp for Vani tree. And these are the names bearing Vani in different places. It will not be Vani, it will be Bunny, it will be Shammi, it will be Jammi, and Kejri. For instance, the word Kejriwal, a man from Kejri. It's called Kejriwal. Then comes to archaeology. Very important finds for people's pastime. They use how they play dice. We know, for instance, in Mahabharata, this entire story is based on this dice. But nowhere in those places, if you dig, people have found these things or these objects. But interestingly, they have found it in Gujarat, which is an Indian site, and they have found it in Kiradi. They have found this in Purundal and a few other locations now. And what's interesting is it's all similar. The shapes are similar, the patterns are similar, the numbers are similar. And one more feature to addition to this is talked about in Sangam literature. There are several poems talking about how the heroine was so happy when the number 10 came, when you roll the dice. So like that, several poems are there. And of course, the Jallikattu, that thing we have now here, you can see it in Mohenjo-daro, and the connections with the livestock that this shows. And you can see in Mohenjo-daro that not only bulls, it was the, what do you call, buffaloes. Sorry, buffaloes. A lot of seals with buffaloes can be seen. Buffaloes had a very high position in society, unlike now. Today, buffalo is seen as a derogatory thing, like donkey. Now, I think with that, I'll be completing now in a few minutes. This book employs so much of maps. It's not just seeing a flat map. A map has to be interesting. It has contours. So all these contours in different colors have been produced in this book, not just with the placing, so that it appears interesting for people to read the book. And the images were taken from several locations, including Harappa. We have taken permission to do this. And some drone shots were taken in Jallikattu, when Jallikattu was happening. That's what you see on the right side. That's very interesting images. Then flowcharts, infographics. Lovely infographics, which will help us understand very quickly, easily. And illustrations. This book is full of illustrations. So it has so much of content, and it has so much of maps, illustrations, and photographs. And of course, poetry. There's a website called Learn Sangam Tamil. Balakrishnan acknowledges them, and latest findings, which you saw in one of the early slides. And very extensive bibliography and index. Just if you look at the bibliography, you will know the sheer hard work that has gone into it. And of course, the index. Because such a big book, I think it is important to have an index for people to look at things. And this has been reviewed by many people now. Finally, Balakrishnan brings in a very interesting metaphor called the Rainforest Metaphor. The Indian civilization is not a salad. It's not a salad bowl or a melting point, as described earlier by many people. In a pot, you put everything and everything melts or boils, becomes one thing. In a fruit salad, they don't, even though they touch each other, but they don't mix with each other at all. So he uses this very interesting metaphor called rainforest, where the rainforest has everything in it, from small shrubs, herbs, to large trees, huge trees. There's a canopy, and top of the canopy still projects out, and there is some more greenery there. So all these things are in a rainforest. And he ends in his epilogue, he talks about this rainforest in a very big way. And finally, this book promotes or talks so much about in favor of diversity, pluralism, coexistence, because the subcontinent, this is the nature of the subcontinent. And the book also addresses these things in a big way, and the tribal population is given some more importance because they are the original people of this land. So it's very important. And finally, the last, on the right side, you see this signboard called Tamari. That's a place where Balakrishnan first went. As I mentioned earlier, he went to this village where he was intrigued by this word Tamari, and got down from his jeep and started talking to people and found so much of similarities in these languages. So that's where he got his inspiration. He ends his book with this beautiful line from Sangam literature called Yadam More Yavaram Kelir. Thank you very much. If you have some questions, I'll be happy to answer. please raise your hands if you have questions so that a person will unmute you. No questions? I see some students here from Asian College of Journalism. Yeah.
I have a quick question. I think, first of all, excellent talk.
And that's Mr.
This is
Archaeology.
Yes, it's an
So
excellent
please
talk.
unmute yourself.
I did. Can you hear me now?
No. One moment, sir. We can't hear you. Yeah.
I have a quick question. I think, first of all, excellent talk.
And that's Mr. Archaeology.
Yes. I think there is a time lag, but let me be very quick. You mentioned the whole talk is excellent, but one point which really stood out for me, I have listened to so many talks by Mr. Balakrishnan, but today you said the Dravidian and Aryan is not genetic, the people, but it's kind of a linguistic focused term. Can you please elaborate? Thank you. I have listened to so many talks by Mr.
It's not a question. Any other questions, please? If you have no questions, then I'll ask people to simply buy this book and read it for yourself. But yeah, you have a question? I thought you were raising your hand. No. Yes, please. Give her a mic. The light potla. Yes, please.
No, it's audible.
Yeah.
So, like, as per my knowledge, I knew that the script which was written during the Harappan civilization is not deciphered yet.
Yes.
So how could a Balakrishnan sir actually go through the Harappan civilizations? Details about in one slide you were showing the similarity between the language. So how could he understand it?
Yeah. Mr. Balakrishnan has not attempted in deciphering or interpreting any of these seals except the images in that, not the script, right? He has not attempted looking at the script yet, but the images are there, like the bull, that's tangible information, right? Or a buffalo, or the trees there. So that's quite tangible.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Yes.
Well, sir, my question is regarding the epic tale Silapatikaram. Am I audible?
Yeah.
So it's about Silapatikaram.
It is?
About Silapatikaram. The novel.
Silapatikaram, okay.
Yeah, you discussed it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not about civilization, but I mean, it's an interesting piece of literature, and it also defines the mood of Sangam literature to a great extent. And it also defines the chasticity of a woman, I mean, how she defends her husband.
Yeah.
So how feminist can you call this? I mean, this epic tale.
How?
Feminist.
How feminist?
Can this epic tale be called?
I don't understand this question. Can somebody? Actually, this book is not dealing with that aspect. Mr. Balakrishnan is trying to identify the parallels in different regions. Right? What did Kannagi do? The act of Kannagi, she was pushed to do something. Similarly, people were pushed to do in many places. So from that, what do we understand? That's a question he's raising. That's a very important thing. Apart from that, of course, how the Tamils have interpreted this is a different thing. For instance, the name Kannagi has been given to girl children in Tamil Nadu, the maximum, even though you see Kannagi, how many years did she live with her husband? If somebody is not able to live with their husband, then the society looks down upon her. That's how it has been. But yet, the Tamils have named their children with Kannagi. I don't have the number now, it may be in one of the slides, but so many names, so many people. The density is much more in Nagapattinam and Tonde Mandalam, the northern Tamil Nadu, northern and central Tamil Nadu. So that's very important for us. Why? Because courage is what people appreciate. That kind of a brave woman who could oppose people in power, right? That's more important. That's the learning for us here. And we do not want to get into that area of what feminism is actually talking about. That's not what he's attempted here.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Who? Aaron? Agnel, please go ahead.
Hi, sir. I have a quick question. So I haven't read the book yet. It looks like I think Balakrishnan probably have chosen Kongu Vellalar and the Nagarathar to as a discussion point. Some of the recent genetic research shows that pretty much most of the communities probably lives in Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Karnataka, or probably migrated from the Indus Valley region. So is there any specific reason why those two communities were focused, or those two, focused or taken as a discussion point? I haven't read the book yet, so.
As early as 19th or 18th century. Through this has been, they have been doing this for a very long time, both Nagarathars as well as the Kongu Vedalars. In their literature, you can find about their clan names and as early as, from where they have migrated. 18th century, from where they have migrated. Whereas it's important because if Balakrishnan had assumed, if he had talked about other communities and where they have not documented, it is subject to his own interpretation about that, or his own people can criticize about that. So he did not want to get into that. So he wanted to be very authentic with what he is writing. So he uses the literature that has been documented by these communities. That's what is very important.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes. Hold on, just can you speak in the mic?
At one point you said that there is not much discussion about the South India in history, like in particular, but Upinder Singh has mentioned South Indian history in a wide range.
Huh? Huh? Yeah. And
Yeah,
so what's your question?
my question is, I think maybe I misunderstood, but you said like South Indian history is not that much introduced or poetry,
Yeah.
but in the Upinder Singh part, it has introduced, I guess.
Who was introduced?
Upinder Singh. Upinder Singh.
Yeah, I'm talking about this book which talks about Indian pottery as a book. Upinder Singh has not written a book on pottery.
Yeah.
Upinder Singh, this is one of the chapters, right?
Yes.
So this is not an exclusive book on pottery. Whereas B.N. Saraswati has written an exclusive book on Indian pottery and ignores the South Indian pottery. I think the author is here. If you can ask the author to say a couple of words. Can you unmute?
Thank you very much, Sundar. As usual, it has been. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Can you unmute?
Thank you very much, Sundar. As usual, it. Yeah, can I speak?
Yes, sir. We can hear you, sir.
Am I audible? Okay. There is a time lag. It doesn't matter. See, thank you very much, Sundar, for an excellent presentation about this particular book. A couple of things that the Upinder Singh's book, which I am right now having, it's an excellent work done in recent times with a lot of illustration. For the first time, somebody has promoted South Indian history in a more decent way. But then normally the traditional history earlier, before the Indus Valley Civilization was found, obviously cannot afford to make a mention about it. And subsequently also, the South Indian history has been always treated as a sub-chapter of the Indian history. Like you talk about the Vedas, you talk about the Harappans. Then after Harappan was found, Harappan is a little mentioned. That is also not very greatly mentioned. Then you talk about Maurya, Gupta, then Harsavardhana, Chalukyas, Pulkesi. Then suddenly the South Indian history will start. Chera, Chola, Pandya will be mentioned. Not much of Sangam literature. And then we talk about the Rajendra Chola. And basically we focus in the medieval history of Tamil Nadu and occasional very cursory mentioning about Sangam literature. What we are trying to say that if you connect this dot in Indian history, I'm not argue that it has to start from the Sangam literature, but if it has to start from the Harappan civilization, if you want to understand the Harappan civilization properly, you have to use the Sangam literature as a tool. The Sangam literature and the Harappan civilization may belong to two different timelines, but the key remains with the Sangam literature because it belongs to the same legacy. That means the key for understanding Harappan civilization remains embedded in the Sangam literature. This is a take I am taking, and that kind of position so far has not been given to the Sangam literature, which it deserves. People have started looking at Sangam literature in this angle only in recent times. And second thing, as the Sundar has already pointed out, if you don't take, I took purposely the case study of the Nagarattar and the Kongu Velalars, because they themselves say that they don't belong to their current geography. The Velalar says that we are now in Kongu. Before that, we were in Chola country. We came along with the princess when she got married to a Chera king. Then before that, we were in Tondai Mandalam, like that. You go to Chettinadu, they say that no, we don't belong to this place. We were in Kaveri Pumbitinam in Chola country. Before that, we were in Tondai Mandalam in Kanji. Before that, we were in a country called in town called Nagara. And then they go and talk about that earlier migration. So then I am quoting them and proving them correct. Suppose if I take up somebody else who believes that he lives here for 2 crores years or about 2 lakh years, so he may find fault with me. So that is the reason I think you are absolutely right. What is true of these Velala people and the Nagaratar people must be true of many of us, many of the people in Tamil Nadu. I am not differentiating. I have no doubt about it. But I am not touching about them because they are not talking about it. So that is the reason, limited case study. There's only case study. And also another reason for the case study, the signature mark of the Indus civilization, number one, it's basically a trader-specific maritime trade centric civilization, town civilization. So number one, it's urban, it's a maritime trade specific. So Nagaratar is comparable with that. And second thing is agro-pastoral society, and Velalars are comparable with that. Both the communities are talking about a migration. To the extent that even where these Velalars say, they said Gangai Karai Karalar, they call themselves. So if they themselves call us a Gangai Karai Kalar, then nobody will come and quarrel with me. That is the reason we took.
Thank you, all of you. Have a good evening and good day in the US and other places. Thank you very much.